Picture this. A hot July afternoon in the year 1518. In the bustling streets of Strasbourg, a woman steps into the open square. She begins to dance, not with the grace of celebration, but with the restless, jerking motions of someone who cannot stop. Hours pass. Crowds gather. Whispers spread. Has she gone mad? Is this witchcraft or divine punishment? By nightfall, she collapses, only to rise the next morning, still dancing. Within days, dozens join her. By the end of the month, hundreds are caught in the same strange compulsion, unable to rest, unable to control their bodies. Some dance until their feet bleed, others until they collapse from exhaustion, and some, they say, until death. This was the dancing plague of 1518, one of history's strangest, most baffling events. And even 500 years later, we still don't have all the answers. Today, we'll step into the world of Renaissance Europe to uncover the context, the chaos, and the possible causes behind this surreal episode, and explore how desperation, belief, and the human mind collided in one of history's most bizarre spectacles. To understand the dancing plague, we must first step into Strasbourg as it was in the early 16th century. The city stood at the crossroads of trade in the Holy Roman Empire, prosperous yet tense. The year was one of hardship. A brutal heat wave scorched the region. Crops were failing. The Rhine River was low, affecting trade and supplies. Hunger and disease were frequent visitors. And politically, tension simmered. The Protestant Reformation had begun just a year earlier, shaking the foundations of Europe's religious unity. But perhaps most important was the mindset of the people. This was a deeply religious society, steeped in superstition. Witchcraft, curses, and divine punishment were considered everyday possibilities. Saints could heal, demons could harm, and unexplained events were often linked to the will of God. Strasbourg was also under the influence of strong guild laws and religious authority. Public life was orderly, almost rigid, but beneath the surface, people carried the weight of famine, fear of disease, and uncertainty about the future. It was, in short, a society primed for something extraordinary and potentially irrational to happen. The story begins with a woman known as Frau Troffea. On a warm day in July 1518, she stepped into the streets and began to dance. Not a joyful, rhythmic celebration, but a strange, compulsive, uncoordinated movement. There was no music. She did not respond to those calling her to stop. She danced for hours, into the night, and into the next day. Onlookers may have thought she was performing penance, possessed, or simply suffering from madness. But when she did not stop, not for food, not for rest, curiosity turned to alarm. Within a week, 30 more people joined her. By the end of the month, according to records, 400 people were caught up in the frenzy. Some danced for days. Some screamed in pain. Some collapsed, their bodies giving in. Reports claim that several died from exhaustion. stroke, or heart failure, though the exact death toll remains debated. This was not a celebration. It was a crisis. The City Council of Strasbourg, baffled and alarmed, sought solutions. At first, they assumed the afflicted would recover if they simply danced it out, believing it was a case of hot blood that could be cured by movement. So they cleared a special space for the dancers. They even hired musicians and brought in professional dancers to keep the afflicted moving. The logic? If you let the disease burn itself out, it would be gone. But this had the opposite effect. The music seemed to fuel the frenzy. The crowd of dancers swelled. It became a public spectacle. Eventually, the city realized this approach was making things worse. They banned public dancing, tore down stages, and ordered the afflicted to be taken to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, the patron saint often called upon for illnesses involving uncontrollable movements. Saint Vitus was believed to have the power to both curse and cure people with a dancing disease, what medieval Europeans called choreomania. This belief wasn't unique to Strasbourg. In various parts of Europe, from the 14th to 17th centuries, outbreaks of compulsive dancing were reported, often linked to Saint Vitus or Saint John. The idea was that if you had offended the saint through sin, neglect, or blasphemy, you might be cursed to dance uncontrollably. The cure? Pilgrimage, prayer, offerings, and ritual. Those afflicted in Strasbourg were taken barefoot to the shrine of St. Vitus in the nearby town of Saverne. There, priests prayed over them, placed their feet in holy water, and made them wear red shoes, a color believed to ward off evil forces. Some were cured, or at least stopped dancing. The outbreak began to fade by September. Modern historians and scientists have puzzled over the dancing plague for centuries. Several theories have emerged, each fascinating in its own way. 1. Mass hysteria, psychogenic illness. One leading theory is that this was a case of mass psychogenic illness, essentially a shared psychological disorder triggered by extreme stress. In 1518, people in Strasbourg faced famine, disease, and religious turmoil. Under such pressure, mass hysteria can erupt, especially in communities primed by strong shared beliefs. Once a few began dancing, the social and psychological contagion could have swept through the community, with the mind's power over the body producing real, involuntary movement. 2. Ergot poisoning. Another theory points to ergot, a fungus that grows on rye and produces hallucinogenic compounds similar to LSD. Ergot poisoning can cause convulsions, hallucinations, and muscle spasms. If contaminated bread had been eaten, perhaps the townsfolk were physically driven to strange movements. However, critics note that ergot poisoning usually makes movement difficult, not compulsive. 3. Religious or ritualistic origins. Some historians suggest this was a religious ritual gone out of control, perhaps a desperate attempt to appease divine forces during a crisis. Once the ritual began, the fear of stopping, and the belief in being cursed could have pushed people to dance until collapse. For neurological or epidemic illness, a less common theory is that some form of neurological disorder, perhaps triggered by an unknown virus, cause involuntary movements. But the scale and sudden disappearance of the outbreak make this harder to prove. The dancing plague of 1518 has become a symbol, not just of medieval superstition, but of the strange ways the human mind and body respond to fear, stress, and belief. It reminds us that history is not just kings and battles. It is also moments when ordinary people, under extraordinary pressure, behave in ways that defy logic. In a time without modern science, the people of Strasbourg saw the dancing as both a curse and a cure. They lived in a world where the boundary between the physical and the spiritual was blurred, and where the mind's power could be just as real as any disease. Even today, mass psychogenic events still occur, from fainting epidemics in schools to sudden waves of strange tick spread through social media. The difference is that in 1518, the beliefs and fears of the Renaissance world gave such an event a uniquely dramatic and haunting form. Imagine standing in that Strasbourg square in the summer heat, the sound of bare feet slapping the stones, the gasps and cries of the dancers, the priests chanting prayers, and the crowd watching in fear and fascination. Was it madness, poison, a curse, or the human mind breaking under unbearable weight? We may never know for certain. But the dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's most extraordinary reminders that the line between body and mind, between belief and reality, can sometimes be as thin as the rhythm of a heartbeat.